Aleksandar Hemon presents a coming-of-age story from the perspective of a Slovenian teenager. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. And today I have a bit of an interesting short story for you because it is Short Story Tuesday. I wouldn't necessarily, it's weird, but it is around because today's short story is about Slovenia, or Slovenia, Yugoslavia, and it's from an author who is from Slovenia. And today's short story is about the process of buying a fridge. I am referring to Everything by Aleksandar Hemon, which was written in the short story collection Love and Obstacles, and published in 2009. For those who don't know, Aleksandar Hemon is a Bosnian writer who has been writing for the past 20 or so years, getting quite a bit of work published. They are Slovenian, Bosnian, I don't know the specific the specific ethnicity there, but they're from that region of Europe. And what's interesting is they came to America as a tourist in the 90s, but then the Bosnian war broke out, and he was unable to return, and so he was just kind of stuck in America for the next several years. But he took up writing, and a lot of his life in Bosnia, Sarajevo, Serbia, Slovenia, those regions shows up in the stories that he writes, including you see a lot of it in this particular short story collection. And he's also been critical of the Nobel Prize Committee for giving various awards in literature for people who support war criminals, especially in that region of Europe. So a pretty interesting author. I can't wait to read more. I really enjoyed reading this, and I'll tell you why in the analysis section. But without further ado, let's talk about Everything. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Everything focuses on an unnamed narrator who is a Slovenian teenager and a poet, or an aspiring poet, who is sent by his family to Yugoslavia in order to buy a freezer, because they need to freeze their meats, and the father of the family believes this will be a great opportunity for the family, but also they're hoping to teach the narrator a thing or two about the world, because he doesn't seem to have a firm grasp on it yet, even though he claims to have a firm grasp on it. And as he's traveling, he is hoping for sex, because he knows that there's opportunities for that outside of your town, outside of where you live, and he naively thinks that if he offers a woman the pill, that he'll be seen as a gentleman, and she'll want to have sex with him, and he has a rude awakening later in the story about that. But as he's on the train, he's a Serb and a Sarajevan are talking about places where they couldn't find asylum or anything like that. And they end up sitting next to the narrator, and the narrator thinks he's going to be mugged, but he's not. And they tell him a riddle, which we never really find the answer to, although the Serbian, I believe, ends up saying the answer is everything. Which is the title of the story. Eventually, the narrator makes it to the part of Yugoslavia where he was going, and he gets to the hotel. He waits in line behind Americans who want something that they're not able to get, and the narrator feels a desire for the woman who's named Elizabeth, who's traveling with an American man, and he hopes that she'll notice him and maybe want to have sex with him later, especially because their rooms are across from one another. And then at night, the narrator goes outside and he checks out where he needs to buy the fridge in the morning. But he goes to a bar, which is simply named Bar, and he drinks with another bar patron and ends up giving the bar a fair amount of money, some of which came out of the fridge fund, which is not good. And then when he gets out of the bar, he's feeling really horny and wants to have sex, and so he goes outside and tries to find some women, which he does. And he begins walking towards them, and they begin walking away. Eventually, they start running, and he follows. Like, he turns a corner and sees that the women have gone to a man to seek help, and he chases down the narrator, but the narrator is able to make it back to his hotel safely. And then as he goes upstairs drunk, he knocks on the door of Elizabeth, who's sleeping with her husband at the time, and she opens the door, seems very she smiles at him, seems interested in him, and he offers her the pill, which she finds weird. The husband wakes up and is just like, "What are you doing here?" So the narrator comes up with a lie, but he keeps his door open in the hopes that this woman will visit him in the night. But this ends up just making the woman feel weird, and she calls up the sort of hotel manager, who accosts the narrator and beats him up a little bit, but nothing too devastating, and just says that if anything else goes wrong, if the narrator does anything else that's weird, he'll throw him out on the street. The next day, the narrator manages to buy the fridge with a little less money than was originally planned, but there seems to be no problems there. And then the fridge person will deliver it later, they say. Then the narrator returns home, greatly changed by this experience, and as the story comes to a close, they note that the fridge held lots of meat after it was delivered, but when the war broke out, all the meat in the fridge spoiled within like a week, and so they were back to square one, and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a fair bit to talk about with everything here. Very interesting short story that definitely manages to sort of tell an interesting coming-of-age tale mixed with the historical context of what's going on in this story, and maybe even guided by some of Aleksandar Hemon's own life, which I find to be interesting when authors do that. But as I just mentioned, one of the main themes of the story is the coming-of-age tale. You typically see like characters, especially young characters, teenagers, going through a grand experience and having a lot of good things happening to them, and they come out a little bit different. They go through a journey there. And so Hemon writes a story where the narrator begins to find maturity, but they begin to find maturity through negative events that are happening to them. The world is not as easy as the narrator was led to believe or told himself that it could be. Like, he believed he could just go out and find a woman and have sex and encounter all these fun and great things, but as it turns out, the world is not like that. The world is not as simple. I think a good example of this is him saying that he wants to offer a woman the pill and she'll be wooed by that. But what kind of woman would be, swayed by that kind of thing, where all you would have to do is say, "Hey, I have the pill," and they'd be like, "Wow, you really seem to care, let's have sex." That's not really how the world works, and the narrator is quickly hit by that. It's such a simple thing to believe, but it definitely reflects the inaccuracies of how the world works, especially if you are a bit older. Maybe if you're a bit younger, you might agree with the way that he believes that, but that's not really how the world works. And so he comes to realize the harsh realities of the way things are. And what's important is that his parents kind of want him to know about this. They sense that he's a little bit soft, that he isn't ready to go out and see the world, that it might do him some harm if he were to do that without being fully prepared. And so they send him on this trip. They hope that this trip will bring that coming of age journey for him, or it will at least prepare him for when he moves out on his own and encounters all these strange and kind of harsh things. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. "This was youth, a perpetual sense of unease that made me imagine a place where my discomfort would be natural, where I could wallow in my wounds, in heavy air and sea. But my parents believed that it was their duty to guide me to a good, pleasant place where I could be normal. They arranged spontaneous conversations about my future, during which they insisted I declare what it was that I wanted, what my plans for life in college were. I responded with the derivations of Rimbauld's rants about the unknown quantity awakening in our era's universal soul, the soul encompassing everything, sense, sounds, colors, thought, mounting thought, etc. Naturally, they were terrified with the fact that they had no idea what I was talking about. And that's an interesting quote, sort of highlighting how the narrator has their perspective of the world, but when they tell their family about it, they come to realize that, the family comes to realize that they're in no way prepared for the outside world. They're maybe a little too optimistic, a little too hopeful, and at least what's going on in Slovenia, Sarajevo, those places, Bosnia at the time, they did not allow for someone so innocent, so naive, I would say there. And so Hemon shows a major change for the narrator from start to finish in this story. I do have to give them credit. The narrator is very innocent at the beginning of the story, but by the end they've kind of understood a little bit about the bitter nature of the world, the harsh realities, and how such optimism won't really get you that far, and might even get you like beat up by angry hotel managers or men on the street or something like that. Another interesting element of the story is a sense of hopelessness or nihilism as an element of the story. The narrator has ideals and an optimism that is kind of falling away as the story goes on. They seem to hold a lot of value in the words of other poets like Rimbaud, for example. A sense of optimism that they'll have sex, that great things will come to them in this world, and you can find meaning in the writing of others. That's something that I personally believe. However, in hoping for this bright world, the narrator only finds despair. All of the meaning that they held on to is kind of drifting away. Like, he tries to approach these women who find him to be scary, and so they run away from him. He tries to woo Elizabeth, the American in this story, but she's kind of creeped out by him offering the pill, and she's not so willing to just abscond with this young man that she met over her husband, who she's probably known for years. So there's really only despair in this ultimate meeting that he's kind of carved out for himself. There's that idea of the pill again, and the reality that he finds when he tries to offer someone the pill. His ideals have no place, no bearing in this true reality that he's observing. And what's interesting is that it's not only the narrator who experiences this, but his father as well, the family as well, because they place great value in this freezer, this thing that the father believes will elevate the family and result in them having a better time in this very stressful situation, this stressful environment in which they live. And it does seem to help, but as Hemon notes at the end of the story, once the war breaks out and the electricity is cut off, that fridge is useless. All the meat spoils, and the meaning that the family held on to, that the father held on to, is no longer there. It's been washed away. As Albert Camus would say, the absurdity of the situation has been found. And so now the characters need to revel in that absurdity or find themselves in further despair. We don't really find out what happens, but hopefully the narrator and his family were able to adapt in the situation, although the context and the history of the region in this story suggests that might not have happened. And again, like the context and the history of war is very important to this story, as well as Hemon's own life, because this is taking place in Yugoslavia, Sarajevo, Bosnia in the 90s, which was not a great time because civil war was breaking out, partisan fighting, religion, all sorts of things like that. And so it was maybe difficult to hold on to meaning or hope during this time. And Hemon, he wasn't allowed to return to his family as he was visiting America as a tourist, so maybe part of the story is guided by that sort of hopelessness that he was left to watch on the sidelines while his family, his friends, his people were engaging in a brutal civil war that experienced quite a bit of genocide and might have shaken everyone's foundations in what they saw as good and just in the world. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Everything by Aleksandar Hemon, a pretty solid short story, one that is very interesting, especially if you know the history of the Bosnia, the Sarajevo and Serbian Slovenian War, that region, especially after the fall of the Berlin Wall in the early 90s. It wasn't in an ideal time, and a bunch of terrible things happened, and that's my guide, Hemon, but it also might guide, what is happening to maybe a young man who's trying to make sense of the world, as you see in this story. So if you have any thoughts on this, or you just want to say something about my review here, would love to hear from you and have a conversation. Comment below, if you have anything to say. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this short story or this author if they don't already know. Maybe check this out from your local library, as I did. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They might have interesting short story collections. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and naive travels. Hopefully not too naive. Farewell.